Hello and welcome to Growing in Uncertainty. My name is Tess, and through my seminar and coaching business, Wings Unfolded, I help people who love what they're doing, but they're not really sure where it's going. These are times when we can feel stuck in our lives, when we know what we want, but we don't know how to get there yet. So I hope that these videos help you get clarity about who you are, what you want. Hopefully these videos reconnect you to your energy, uplift your energy. I offer insights, tips, and maybe even a little bit of courage to help you along your way. So over the last few weeks, I have been reflecting on the antidote to one of the biggest monsters of stuck, and that is self-doubt. So I've been reflecting on the antidote to self-doubt. I've done that through looking at self-acknowledgement, self-acceptance, self-trust, self-confidence, self-forgiveness. And today I'm going to be talking about self-worth. Now, I feel like every week I come on here, I say something along the lines of, okay, this one is really hard for me. And I know I've probably said that for every single one, but honestly, self-worth has been one of the biggest life lessons that I have engaged with many, many times. It's a theme. Coming back to my own self-worth is a theme that I've had to have play out in my life, standing up for my own self-worth. So I feel like I've learned quite a lot about self-worth and how to develop it, which is why I'm really excited about sharing my ideas and thoughts with you about this today. How much and the way that you value yourself determines the entire quality of your life. And I know that sounds like a really bold statement, but honestly, if you don't feel like you're worth a whole lot, how does that ultimately color your life and how you go about your life, how you go about making the decisions in your life? How does that change the way that you interact with other people if you're showing up not feeling like you're worth a whole lot? It kind of paints a pretty grim picture, doesn't it? But it's a picture that I think a lot of us have experienced at some point in our lives. And it doesn't feel good. It really, really doesn't feel good. When we are in the cycle of not valuing ourselves, we can have a tendency to not go for what we want, not put ourselves out there. And then what happens is we look around and say, why don't I have what I want in my life? What's happening? No matter how hard I try, I just don't seem to get what I want. But we have to go inward and really develop our inner value first before we can really start to go for what we really want in our lives. Sometimes self-worth can get mixed up with self-esteem. Sometimes people interchange those words, but I view those words as being very different. Self-esteem looks at how we value our qualities or our attributes or our skills. It's valuing what we're capable of doing in the world. Self-worth is when you value yourself, no matter what happens, no matter what you have, no matter what you can do, no matter what happens, you are inherently worthy. You can have low self-esteem, but still have a high sense of self-worth. If you don't have self-worth, however, and you have low self-esteem, that's a really good recipe for getting stuck in any area of your life. I always had a hard time with self-worth because I was afraid of being too much or too greedy or seen as selfish or too confident or being unrealistic in my life. The story I told myself was that the people who hold themselves in too high of a regard don't have meaningful relationships or lives. They have narcissistic tendencies. They take more than they give. And these were definitely not the things that Sesame Street or Mr. Rogers were promoting at all. So at a very young age, as a kid, I knew that I wanted to be seen as a good person and to not be greedy and take more and take too much of my fair share. I did want to be seen as a good person, someone who thought about other people's needs, someone who was reliable and responsible, someone who gave more than they took. They left things in better shape than they found them. But striving to be a good person led me down some pretty unhealthy paths. The way that this manifested in my life was that, I was putting others' needs ahead of my own, which really depleted my energy and left me feeling like I didn't have enough. I didn't have any boundaries, and therefore people would have a tendency to walk all over me and not regard my feelings or anything that I needed. I didn't know, oftentimes I wouldn't know what I wanted because I was always worried about what other people wanted. And I wanted to make sure other people felt comfortable around me and other people's needs were taken care of. And I ended up feeling like I could never have what I wanted. And so therefore I just wouldn't even say what I wanted. I would just kind of hope that my hopes and dreams would come true without actually stating what it was that I wanted. I had a feeling like there was never enough resources, never enough space, never enough opportunities for me. So I would just end up having to take whatever I could get. So, for example, saying yes to all of the gigs that came my way, even the ones that weren't really healthy for me, or settling for whatever happened. You're at a restaurant and you get your order and it's not quite what you ordered, but you just take it anyway because you don't want to be a bother. Or just allowing other people to treat me the way that they felt like they could. I always felt like I had to earn other people's friendship, even after I'd been friends with them for like decades. And the way this looked was I might, buy them a lot of gifts or do everything that they wanted to do. Maybe it was allowing them to say mean things to me and not speaking up about it and letting them know how that affected me. And I stayed in these behavioral patterns because of fear. I was afraid of making people not like me if I had any wants or needs, or I was afraid that I'd be alone and I wouldn't have any friends, or I was afraid that if I took up too much space or needed anything, I'd be seen as being really greedy. But to be clear, here is what self-worth is not. Self-worth is not only considering yourself and your needs in all situations, or making the boundaries so firm that nobody can get close to you or connect with you, or feeling entitled to receive anything you want right when you want it, or believing and behaving as if everyone else is beneath you, or not recognizing your own mistakes and never taking responsibility for anything that happens to affect other people. And then finally, being unable to see things from other people's perspective. None of those things are having self-worth. Those are kind of the opposite. Those are that's more of that narcissistic tendency, or valuing yourself above all others. But that doesn't have to be the way that self-worth works. That line between self-worth and narcissism was hazy for me until I started to really look at what my mentors or the heroes that I looked up to in my life really exhibited, or how they behaved in the world. And what I noticed is that the people that I really looked up to, they behaved as if they were worthy of love, but they didn't do it in a way that made it so that everyone else felt like they had to love them no matter what, or love them in the way that they wanted to be loved. These people weren't defined by what they had or what they could do. They would allow themselves to feel their feelings, but also take ownership for their feelings. In other words, they wouldn't blame other people for how they were feeling. They could be alone and not worry about what other people thought of them. They always had this sense that there was plenty of room for them. There were plenty of resources, plenty of opportunities to allow them to do and have and ask for what they wanted. They were non-judgmental about others and themselves. And the world didn't revolve around them. They were able to see other people's perspectives. And they had a practice of gratitude in their lives. And they realized that they had the power to write their own stories. In other words, they had the power to interpret the way things happened to them. They didn't have to be defined in a certain way or in a certain light. So going from a lack of self-worth to feeling self-worth isn't really a simple switch. It's not like you can just say, okay, today I'm going to decide to, feel worthy in all ways. It doesn't work that way, unfortunately. It takes a lot of self-reflection, and it takes action. You have to demonstrate to yourself that you are worthy before you can really start to feel it. Or you have to demonstrate to yourself that you recognize your worth. It can feel uncomfortable at first because you might be going against patterns or habits that have been there for a really long time. If you've always been in the habit of putting others before you, then to all of a sudden state what you need and want can bring up a lot of feelings that are uncomfortable. You might have to work with a therapist at first in order to heal old wounds that might be keeping you stuck in feelings of devaluation. So that might be something to consider as well. So there are 5 things that I recommend that you can do to start demonstrating self-worth to yourself. The first one is to become aware of the times in your life when you have devalued yourself. This might look like writing about those times in a journal, or taking note of how you felt when you have devalued yourself. For example, I have a lot of stories about when I said yes to gigs that really weren't good for me, and I would feel energetically depleted and exhausted for days and days afterward, which meant I couldn't do any of the things that I might have wanted to do because there just wasn't anything left for me. Another example is when I would make plans with friends and we'd choose an activity that maybe I didn't quite feel safe doing, or I just really didn't want to do it, but I didn't want to let anyone down. Fortunately, everything would turn out fine, but then I would suffer the emotional consequences of having to do something that I didn't really want to do. So you can write all of those experiences down in a journal and take a look at them so that you really, really recognize what devaluing yourself is. Step 2 is to think about who you look up to in your life and how they conduct themselves. Like I gave you the list of attributes and behaviors that my heroes and mentors really exhibited. And you can ask yourself, well, what do my heroes do in their lives to demonstrate their worth? Why do I think they're so worthy? What is it that they do? If you could meet them, or if it's somebody famous, or if it's somebody that you don't really know, what would they think of you? What do you think? How would they treat you? Hopefully it would be with respect. If it's somebody that you truly respect yourself, that's probably how they would treat you too. And then you can ask yourself, how can I be more like this person that you really idolize or really respect, or really feel that they have a lot of worth to you? And after reflecting a lot on what self-worth does or does not look like in your life, then it's important to really start taking action to demonstrate self-worth to yourself. Again, it might not feel good at first because you're going against the grain of your old patterns, and you might have to rise above those feelings that come up for you. Yes, your feelings are really important and they're real, but they aren't always leading us to what's in our best interest. So if you start to feel guilty about taking any of the next 3 action steps I'm going to give you, ask yourself again what your hero or mentor would do and how they might do it. So step 3 in developing self-worth is, at the next and first opportunity that comes along, speak up about what you want. This might be when you're making plans with friends or family. It might be at your place of work. You can state your needs or your goals or your wants at work. And remember that when you state what you want, people get to know you better. This is a step in the right direction of having better relationships. When people know you better, then they know how to relate to you. And it's a win-win situation for everyone, because then you feel like you're known and other people know how to be with you. They know how to be around you. Step 4 in developing your own self-worth is to notice and challenge your inner critic. This is that voice that comes up whenever you might feel like, I just don't know if I'm doing the right thing. I just don't know if I deserve that. I don't know if I should do that. And it's also that voice that speaks up whenever you make a mistake in your life, or you do something that has an outcome that really isn't what you wanted or what you expected. That voice might be really mean to you in that moment. So what you can do in those moments when your inner critic starts to speak to you is that you can really think about, well, how would I talk to a friend right now? How would I want to be spoken to right now? And you can start to challenge your inner critic and say, how true is that really? Or I don't deserve to hear that right now. Or go away, take a hike, go take a break. You're not really empowering me right now. And you can ask your inner critic to leave. And instead, you can say something empowering to yourself, or you can restate whatever your inner critic was trying to say. Like, if your inner critic was saying, you're such a loser, you can say, I tried my best in this situation and I learned a lot. Or if your inner critic is saying, you don't deserve to have anything that you want, then you can say, actually, getting what I want will bring me joy right now, and joy spreads outward to everyone, and I want everyone to have that joy too. So I'm going to have this now. So those are just some examples of ways that you can get into more of a neutral or more of a positive mindset when it comes to your inner critic. Step 5 in developing more self-worth is to notice when you or other people are being dismissive or not taking you into consideration, and to tell them. This one's kind of big, especially if you're like me and you grew up as a people pleaser. Definitely feelings of guilt can come up, and I've had to learn how to tell myself that it's my job to let other people know how I want to be treated, and it's important to set healthy boundaries. Healthy boundaries are better for everybody in the long run because it doesn't leave room for any kind of interpretation of how they could treat you. So when you feel inherently worthy, you develop resilience in any time of self-doubt. So I have a story that highlights that idea of resilience in times of self-doubt. And this relates to the time when my first boyfriend broke up with me. It was when I was a teenager, and that is such a vulnerable time in anybody's life. And even though I knew that it was probably going to happen, and I knew that I probably wasn't in the best relationship in the world, it was still really hard for me. And at the time that it happened, I was feeling particularly worthless. I didn't have any self-worth inside of me because I had been placing all of my self-worth on other people, and especially in particular this boyfriend. So when he broke up with me, it took all of my self-worth away. I had nothing. And I could really hear my inner critic for the first time in my life. I was in so much pain that I actually started listening to what that inner critic was saying. And I started saying, wait a minute, is that really healthy? Is that really what I want for the rest of my life going forward? And the answer, thankfully, was no. I started to push back against my inner critic because I knew that pattern of looking to the outside world for my worth and my value was really unhealthy. It took me a lot of months to heal from that, but I did the work to really demonstrate self-worth to myself, and I really started to notice when I would place that worth outside of myself. I started to invite it back inside again. I started being nicer to myself. And I followed, even though I wasn't a coach yet, certainly at that point in my life, I started to follow some of those steps that I already outlined today in this video. And once I recovered from that experience, I was a lot stronger than before I went through all of that. And I finally really knew who I was so that I could start going forward in my life, knowing that my self-worth was there for me whenever I needed it. And in the years since, I've certainly had my fair share of challenges to my self-worth. But the more I've developed self-worth, the more resilient I've become in recovering from those times. It takes me much less time to heal, and I don't stay stuck in it like I used to. And I've learned that that process of healing, whenever something does come to rub up against my self-worth, that's where all the gold is. That's where I know where I still need to do some work on myself. And that process is so valuable to me now. It's uncomfortable, but that discomfort has value and purpose in it. And that's what keeps me going in that process. So when I'm feeling self-doubt in my life, I remember that no matter what happens, I still have value, no matter what. So you might remember that my focus word for this year is freedom. And when we have self-worth, we are free to write our own stories, to take our own paths, and to be who we are fully without apology. So may you discover and strengthen your own self-worth this week and in the weeks to come. And I hope this message really resonates with you. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm always so grateful for your presence and to hear how any of the things that I share really resonate with you. So please like or share these videos with friends and family that you think might benefit from hearing this. And yes, I am still finishing up my book. I will be announcing my book launches. There will be multiple ones, I think, just to accommodate everyone's time. They will take place over Zoom, and I hope you'll be able to join me at those launches and learn what I have to say about those moments in life when we're stuck. The book is called The Book of Stuck, and it's all about navigating out of stuck. And if you're ready to embark on any transitions in your life, you can reach out to me on my website, www.tess-miller.com, and you can sign up for a Test Your Wings complimentary session and get that on my calendar. You can also find me on Facebook under my business name, Wings Unfolded LLC. You can also find me under that name on LinkedIn. And you can find me under my name on Instagram and YouTube. Feel free to send me a private message. I'd love to connect with you. And remember that it's okay to be stuck, but you don't have to stay there. Have a really amazing week and take care.